Hello, everybody. Let's start our webinar. Welcome. And we are very happy to have you here today. My name is Eugene Steinberg. I'm head of search and NLP practice at Grid Dynamics. We are having the webinar today, which is called Talk to Your Data. Can artificial intelligence unlock business intelligence for your team? Let me start by saying a few words about our topic today. Today we'll talk about the power of the natural language processing and emerging digital application and digital assistant applications, which can give users, business users, employees, to the power to literally talk to your data, literally access the company information in a conversational way. All this to be able to make better decisions, both on a work day and strategic decisions. When we think about that, think about Tony Stark talking to Jarvis in his design lab. And Jarvis helped him to find, summarize, slice and dice the data which Tony needs to support his creativity. And when we map from this wide vision to the current reality, the modern enterprises generate, store, process, disseminate mountains and mountains of data. It's both long-term knowledge, such as policies, contracts, technical specifications, design descriptions, manuals, best practices, all that kind of jazz. And operational data, like financial information, like supply and demand figures, production reports. And then enterprises spend tons of money trying to consolidate all this data, trying to make sense of this data, and finally try to deliver this data at the right time, to right people in the right situation. And still this last mile delivery of right data to right people to the right time is challenging. And today we are going to talk about that. We will talk about the biggest question, can the modern conversational artificial intelligence systems approach this bold vision of Tony Stark working with Jarvis? And we have our esteemed panel today to discuss this question. And I'd like to introduce our panelists. We'll start with Victoria Lifshitz. Make a wave, Victoria. So she's a founder and SVP of Customer Success at Grid Dynamics. Victoria, please say a few words and introduce yourself.
Sure, Eugene. Thank you for having me here today. I'm, as you said, founded Grid Dynamics in 2006. My goodness, long time ago, with a focus on emerging technologies and how emerging technologies bring innovation to businesses. And artificial intelligence, natural language processing, increasingly conversational systems has been a very big part of that innovation. We've been running a practice related to natural language processing, natural language understanding, and conversational systems for really better part of that entire journey, but especially in the last 5 years. Thank you. And maybe worth mentioning that we approach this from the engineering and system integrator perspective. I know we're going to have other people on the panel today who look at it from the product development perspective or technology development perspective and application development. Our company comes at it as a series of expertise and skills and blueprints to develop custom conversational systems using the best platforms, technologies, products, and APIs that industry has to offer. Thanks.
Right. Thank you, Victoria. The next panelist on our panel today is Igor Yablokov. So Igor represents, he's a CEO of Prion. And Prion is exactly the kind of a platforms which Victoria was talking about, which enables those kind of experiences. And Igor, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi there. So Prion, as a point of trivia, was actually the code name of the speech engine that became Alexa. Our last venture ended up being Amazon's first ever AI-related acquisition and birthed the Amazon Echo and similar things that haunt everybody's kitchen. Knowing that experience is really friendly to manage our households, we started thinking, why is this not all over the enterprise? And so we started addressing some of those problems in terms of the first mile, which is the content problem. How do you harmonize things coming from applications, from open sources, proprietary data, unstructured data, semi-structured data, structured data, fuse it all together. But then on the other side, also solve the last mile problem, which is how do you create conversational system or even a natural language system so that you can leverage all of the information that your enterprise has. That's what we've been working on at Prion.
Very nice. Thank you, Igor. Thank you for introduction. And the next speaker for us will be Mohamed Elgeish. Mohamed is Director of Artificial Intelligence at Cisco, and he is leading the creation of NLP platforms there and conversational platforms. So if you can say a few words about yourself, we are all ears.
Thank you, Eugene. Thanks for having me on the panel. Yeah, as you said, at Cisco, we're dealing with a lot of data in different conversational contexts. Right now, I'm focused on the contact center solution. So when you call a brand for an issue or you have a question, imagine the amount of activities that happen when you just like lift up the phone and call. And this conversation is extremely important to us. So we have AI helping the agents provide the best experience they could. So augmenting the agents with AI, we call them super agents, and AI is your sidekick. So it's really in the same kind of superpowers, theme that you mentioned earlier. And we really like this idea of augmented intelligence, right? Unlocking a lot of value that's stored maybe in like isolated fragmenting systems and bringing that into the call, right? That could also happen at a prior entry point, which is the self-serve or IVR system that asks you like what you'd like to perform, in terms of like questions or activities or tasks that you want to have on the phone. And this happens automatically. So it actually contains that and maybe reduces the pressure on the contact center agents for the mundane tasks that AI can help with. I came to Cisco via the acquisition of Voicea. Voicea was a company we started to have AI in meetings. So you can actually unlock knowledge. We call it turn talk into action. You unlock the tribal knowledge that happens within a lot of meetings. You spend most of your time in meetings, and we want to disseminate that into systems of record that you can then look into, index, and have action items and follow-ups at the fingertips of everybody in the organization, your team, and so on.
The meeting. That sounds extremely useful, and I would love to use such capabilities.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thank you, Mohamed. Happy to have you on the panel today. And last but not least, the panelist is Brad. And Brad is Director of Data Science at USSA. And Brad is responsible for actually bringing it all together and driving the actual value for the enterprise using all those horizontal platforms, solutions, like consulting companies. And Brad, why don't you introduce yourself? We are so happy to have you on a panel today.
Sure. Thanks, Eugene. Happy to be here. Brad Dodrell, everyone. I'm lead data science for fraud and central operations at USAA. We build and deploy solutions for the fraud, authentication, proofing, and disputes domains. Prior to this role, I was a data scientist, so building the solutions, not having to lead them, and also kind of focused some on the cybersecurity portfolio. I've had stints at Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo, and Citi, and also spent 5 years in academia, looking into NLP and consumer choice and fraud and misreporting, specifically in the areas of mutual funds and hedge funds. A little bit of the disclaimer, the views and thoughts that I'm about to express are mine and not necessarily those of USAA, but I am very excited to be here and look forward to talking to all y'all.
Yeah, thank you. And we hope to hear from you some word from the trenches. And what does it mean to implement and create those solutions in reality? A word of pragmatism here. Before we start with our questions, I want to reach to the audience. And first of all, super happy to have you here, guys. And second, I want to ask you, to put a word or two in our chat about how do you use the conversational artificial intelligence now in your personal life or professional life? And what do you think about it? Like, do you believe in the bright future of this, or you have your concerns or questions? So we will be happy to look at that. Now, without further ado, let's switch to first of our questions. And the question which I want to ask the panel today is digital assistants. We know them. We saw different examples of them. But looking pragmatically, and looking at the current business situation and business applications, where do you see what business applications are actually driving the adoptions of artificial intelligence and specifically natural language processing technology? And is this technology really ready for prime time? So, Mohammed, let's start with you. Like, what's your take at Cisco?
Yeah, I'll give you my take on a very specific example I alluded to earlier, which is assisting the agent to help the customer in the most effective way possible. And if you think about it, everybody in that value chain wants that. And it's a very practical thing to add. So you have a baseline today in terms of like KPIs, key performance indicators that almost every contact center tracks. So it's the average handle time it takes you, right, to handle a call, or it's maybe the first call resolution rate. So answering your query or solving your problem without putting you on hold. So let me ask you, actually, Eugene, would you like to have the agent put you on hold and like maybe ask a supervisor, or would you rather the AI come in with an answer in the same second that you ask the question?
I hate handling on calls as much as the next guy. So.
Yeah, so we like that kind of symbiosis between the AI and the human, right? Having us teach the AI over time, improving the AI with like answers we collect from agents and feedback, but also the AI getting smarter over time, right? With this kind of usage and this kind of feedback loop and suggesting recommendations. So let's say you call in, you say, hey, I lost, this maybe phone or my wallet at your store. What should I do? Right. And now instead of the agent like maybe putting you on hold and asking another more experienced agent or their supervisor or even searching internally, like this will take time. Instead, what's happening is the AI is listening in the background, transcribing the call, picking on things that are important, your question, for example, and then looking up the answer in some knowledge base. And then telling the agent, by the way, I have an answer for you. I can help you. I'm your Jarvis, right? I'm your sidekick. And here's the answer. Here are the steps that you should tell the customer. And then the human is in the loop, right? The agent's actually thinking of like, okay, that makes sense.
Not the AI intercepting the call and starting mechanically kind of read something from the frequently asked questions or knowledge base. It's basically he suggests, like he's a co-pilot of the agent and he suggests him what to say to the customer, right?
That's right. That's right. And then, some of these questions are so easy for the AI to actually give a great answer for, and you might want to put that in the IVR in the beginning of the call. And if the AI can answer it, great. Now the agent can actually ask the agent can actually get asked a much harder question, right? And I think, in my opinion, that's more satisfying. Like if you help somebody with something harder, you feel like you help them significantly.
That makes sense. Make a lot of sense. And I really hope that this kind of technology will become mainstream and cut my time hanging on all these calls and make interaction with the helping agents much more smoother. Thank you very much, Mohammed, for this answer. Brad, from your standpoint, I know that you're coming from a financial industry, insurance, that kind of things. Probably you're doing a lot of fraud detection. What is your team working on when it pragmatically touches the natural language processing and knowledge management and all that kind of things?
Yeah, so I think when I think of like applications and things that we're working on, I think they generally fall in two categories, right? You have the kind of the customer facing products, and then you also have back office. I think Mohammed really covered in general a lot of the customer facing type applications of AI and NLP. I mean, call intent, routing, those are very important. One that's very passionate to me is is the back office piece of it, right? It maybe doesn't get necessarily all the visibility of a customer facing one, but it's just equally as important. And to me, it potentially could be more generalizable to more industries, and not necessarily just product facing companies. But on the back office side, I mean, if you think about like ML ops and IT operations and maintenance, I mean, chatbots, MLP could be huge to really ease some of the burden and manual steps involved in doing that. I mean, I am in fraud and we work in an adversarial environment. And so things change, right? I mean, we put a model in and then that's the best that model is going to perform. And as soon as we put that in, the thing that we're modeling is going to change his or her tactics, right? So we see major degradation in our products over time, right? And then it's a manual steps to remediate that. So having, NLP, chatbots, digital assistants to help either trigger a retrain, or if you have an automated pipeline, moving that model forward in production without taking as much of the manual steps is huge. I mean, I think one other just, quick example from a back office standpoint is something just, as simple as HR, right? Getting a voice of your employees, right? Understanding their sentiment and intent over time. There's huge opportunities for NLP and kind of digital assistance in our space. I think also, Eugene, you kind of mentioned earlier, is it available for prime time? I would say yes. I mean, we're here today, we're talking about it. Is it mature? I mean, it's mature in the sense that it's here and it's improving value, but I think there's still so much more room to grow. If you think about like a product life cycle, for instance, we're past development, we're somewhere in introduction and growth, and NLP is here to stay. Companies are having a lot of value with it, and I highly recommend if your company's not already doing that, please invest in some of these strategies.
That makes sense. And so, the reality, and the pragmatism, which I hear in your voice, is exactly what we are looking for. So, back office applications and all kinds of capabilities which natural language processing platforms allow you to make sense out of really unstructured data and deliver it in a more kind of summarized and meaningful way is extremely important. And probably this is a good way to turn to Igor, who is responsible for this kind of platforms creation and development. And the question which I would ask you, you probably, as a horizontal platform, work across a variety of verticals, variety of different customer profiles. Where do you really see the most traction these days? What is already kind of working pragmatically, delivering business value to the customers?
Yeah, so great question, right? Because as you said, if you have a horizontal NLP platform, what can you do with it? Almost anything, right? Because imagine this, what could you do with a human being who can read and write? Well, guess what? Human beings that can read and write perform every function you can think of in a modern enterprise. Now, what can you do with an AI that can read not one book a weekend, but 10,000 books a weekend, or not just books, but review all transcripts, and not just transcripts but all these documents, but not just documents, but all of the web content related to different issues, right? Tickets and things of that sort. So 5 major clusters of use cases. I think the team here already covered lots of great ones in terms of internal help desk and external contact centers, lots of process automation, lots of knowledge sharing, and lots of deep search. But specifically, we recently announced a use case that Georgia Pacific was driving where they had us absorb a whole mess of safety related information for their supervisors as they go and do plant inspections. And so they can just talk to this thing, type through natural language as well, and immediately get policies and procedures and things of that sort as they're tending to various equipment. We've seen financial services trying to find all sorts of mentions of at regulator sites of complaints. We've seen procurement teams ingest RFPs and RFIs, especially the winning ones, so they can construct better bids in order to win. We've seen government affairs groups. So really the sky is the limit, right? If you can ingest PDF files and Word files and PowerPoints and emails and the like, it really lends itself to a myriad of different activities, which is why we're really excited to see all of the varied and creative uses.
Thank you, Igor. And it looks like the secret sauce in this case is not only to find relevant documents by something which you type, but also be able to really kind of point to to the right piece of content, to the right paragraph, to the right words.
Exactly. That's right. The exact answer, right? So these style of technologies lend themselves to retrieval and clustering, right? So how do you find the needle in the haystack or find the bale of hay in the haystack? That is useful in a myriad of different scenarios.
That makes a lot of sense. Victoria, let me direct the same question to you as a consulting company and head of our customer success. You talk to all kinds of pretty well-positioned major companies, major executives. And where do you see them thinking about the biggest opportunities in this space?
Well, I kind of think about 3 levels of value. Level 1 being essentially self-service access to information, the kinds of things that Igor had talked about, where for the wide variety of contexts, people can ask questions that can be answered with facts and data in the intelligent sort of way. And then the next level up is this augmented intelligence, something that both Brad and Mohammed alluded to, where humans' creativity is really enhanced in a collaborative relationship between basically man and a machine. And then there is a third one, which I think we are just starting to stretch the surface, and which is automation of daily tasks using voice commands and same sort of interactions, where I absolutely envision on a daily business basis people saying, oh, I'd like to take a vacation, next week. Please go ahead and submit my expense report. Yeah, let's go and deploy that code in production. Tell me how many test cases we ran so far. Yeah, that looks good enough. Let's go push it, right? So this interaction that now allows me to not only get access to information, but also initiate a variety of different actions, if you will. And then it's a very iterative process. That to me is sort of I don't know if that's the ultimate, but sort of the third level of value. I think collectively, we're just starting to come to the point where that's possible in some narrow set of well-defined scenarios. But as the progress continues to roll on, as it always does, I think that's the next frontier.
We saw a lot of situations then people struggle to deal with a lot of systems to perform their daily knowledge, and it would be really great to be able to just have one common channel, which is a natural language, to all this possible. Let me switch in this case to the question to Igor. Igor, horizontal NLP platform. Natural language processing has been around for decades, right? People try to make sense out of text for many, many generations of different technologies. And you are these days providing a new generation horizontal NLP platform for dealing with unstructured text and turning unstructured data into knowledge. So we have a lot of different technologies in this space historically, but why it is so hard to do, and how Prion is approaching this, how Prion is solving this problem?
Yeah, well, it's easy to choke an AI, right? If you just put a special character in a PDF file and it blows up. So early days of that, but it's hyper automation. Hyper automation will allow it to scale and dynamically change itself to the different conditions of the content that it's ingesting, and we're focused on that. In the same way that in the past, look, you had to route to the appropriate acoustic and language model if you had a different language and speech recognition. Well, what did teams like ours do in the past? Well, we've figured out an automatic way to route these things, and then people started speaking Spanglish, right? Pieces of English, pieces of Spanish simultaneously during the same audio file. Well, we had to figure out how to do that automatically. We had to figure out how to correct for audio defects in the past. So we had to change to dynamic acoustic environments, right? Certainly the acoustic environment of you asking for something in a coffee shop is different than you at an airport, is different than you in the subway as well. So in some ways, this is all territory we've covered before in other modalities. We're just doing it now for document-centric, transcript-centric, email-centric, web-centric content sources versus audio. And that's the path that we're on with our discoveries.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense in a historical perspective. And indeed, to some extent, what we are doing these days is that we are automating everything which previously was depending on humans in the loop. And modern natural language processing models are very good in ingesting that knowledge and making sense out of this unstructured data. Let me switch to Brad. So you started to talk a little bit about your experience with back office applications. And you spoke about some perspectives and achievements in this space, but can you tell a little bit more about the challenges and achievements which you and your teams had in this space? How hard was it to achieve the good results? What was the main obstacle? What people embarking on those kind of projects have to be aware of?
Sure. So I like to focus on the things that I call the pain points of ML, PAIN, right? It's the people, the appetite, the infrastructure, and the need. And they're all, they're not mutually exclusive, right? You really need answers to all four of those if you want to be successful in kind of rolling out these type of solutions, right? If you're developing them internally, right, you have to have the people, right? You have to be able to have the skill sets necessary to create those type of solutions. The programming skills, the statistical skills, even the social and soft skills to get over some of the political hurdles and the selling, really getting people to buy in on these type of solutions. On the appetite, that's really aimed at your senior leadership. Okay, so these projects are very resource and capital intensive, right? They take time to implement. Yes, they save time on the back end, right? But there's a lot of fixed costs to move in this direction, right? So you have to have, support from maybe your senior leadership. And depending on the industry you're in, there could be a lot of compliance and regulatory hurdles that you also need to overcome. And so having a little bit of a shield from those external pressures can make these journeys a lot more successful. Probably the one that's the most important is the infrastructure, right? Having an appropriate technology stack that scales and also helps for whatever phenomena that you're trying to model, right? So take fraud, for example, right? It's very important that we score a lot of events and we do so in real time, right? So we need data that scales. We need streaming infrastructure. We need modeling environments that allow us to create the solutions. And probably the most important, and I hit on it earlier, is really the MLOps piece, right? It's important to get those solutions in, but you also have to monitor them and make sure they're compliant. And the last is probably the need. And here I'm talking about the whole Pareto rule, right? If you can get 80% of the lift without doing one of these solutions, don't do it, right? There is a lot of challenge in moving in this direction. But when you can't and you have to have some of those solutions, you need to make sure it's the right use case. We talked about, the chatbot, digital assistants, those are all things that you're not going to solve with a typical scorecard-based approach that we used to do, years back, right? You need those advanced solutions. So to me, those are the biggest challenges. And if you have answers for all of those, you're going to have a successful journey, but just make sure you kind of work through those at the start of it. And that's one of the biggest things we learned.
Got it. So use the right tool for the right tasks, right? That's a word of wisdom. Thank you, Brad. Victoria, one perspective which is interesting for you, like we spoke a lot about the employees who are trying to get access to the data, but can you share, like, when you talked with senior executives, right, on the different companies and corporations, how would they look and use these artificial intelligence capabilities to make their jobs easier?
Well, they are the Tony Starks of the world, and they do want Jarvis. And the use cases are actually very pragmatic. Preparing for a sales meeting, you want to ask questions. What are our quarterly sales projections? Show me. What was it last quarter? What was it a year ago? Break it down by product line and geography. Tell me again, what is our market share for that particular slice of my sales data, right? We have all that. They have all that. They have dashboards. They have analytics. They have statistics. But how do you bring this just in time when somebody is preparing for the meeting, or let's say it is a staff meeting and a group of executives are sitting together and they're trying to figure out what their strategy is and where they are? Can they actually talk to their beautiful monitor and ask it to project the right data on the right screen, right now for everybody to see. And can you actually have that conversation and navigate that world of data that supports their decision making? That's what they want. And the interesting thing is that they can get it. Now, they need to sponsor it. We have to do a good job explaining to them that that Jarvis capabilities are essentially an implementation project away. But those are the kind of use cases that we are looking at and are in conversations or implementations of with a number of customers.
Yeah, that's a great perspective and makes a lot of sense, because historically executives employed special people to answer those questions. Now they don't. And
well, they still do. They still do. And those people also have people who give them these answers. And so all that corporate bureaucracy that in many cases really rotates about getting access to something that should literally be one syllable away.
Thank you, Victoria. Mohammed, let me ask you this. As a technologist and solution architect at Cisco, historically we had many generations of conversational AI systems, right? It all started in the 60s with ELIZA and evolved ever since. There were many generations of attempts of doing that. And yet we are talking right now that a really kind of new wave of technology came. So what is different now?
It's a good question. I'm actually inspired by your background. So I see the lamp, right? And if you go to somebody in the beginning of the electrical industry taking off, right? And you say to them like, hey, let's go and build a factory for lamps. You'll be like, hold on, what's the market like? What's the infrastructure? Like, I just see the rich and the wealthy, have these lights, but I don't think that, this is not happening as fast as it should be. And that's really what's happening. Like maybe we're just in the beginning of these like fragmented markets or fragmented infrastructure pieces where you still have, as Igor said, and, we alluded to before, there are a lot of things that need to change, need to be built around that ecosystem. So you get three ingredients and you look at how we're moving towards increasing the trajectory and the speed of or acceleration rate for these three ingredients. Data, so digitalization of records. You see this moving at speeds we do not even comprehend today, right? Especially with social media, with any interaction you have online, and with the lockdown, there's a lot more data than ever before. So we're moving very fast in digitizing everything we do. And then you get compute power. Your phone now has more power than computers that took us to the moon. I know a lot of people say this in passing, but let's just sink in for a while and look how many phones are there. So it's not just compute in the terms of the vertical expansion of each unit, each a chip, but it's also how much of that is available today. And you can go on a public cloud, for example, and get a lot of compute power very fast. And then the second and the first ones are really two things that need to be linked together. And that linkage is research and human capital. The algorithms, the ways we can actually make sense of the data and the ways we can use the compute efficiently. And then if you can grow all these ingredients together and move very fast in building the grid, right? So that electrical grid is what enabled a lot of people to do innovation in terms of electric devices and electric appliances that we have today and enjoy and take for granted. Mm-hmm. But the reality is it wasn't that easy to get into that mindset and into that stage without having the infrastructure that is required to have all of these things done very fast and very efficiently.
Yeah, it sounds like we have the grid. Now we need to build more and more applications so that people start to really use it and start to get really used to it. And this mind shift will happen like it happened before with web, with internet, with mobile. That's very interesting perspective, Mohammed. Thank you. Igor, so getting back to the ways how you build this kind of solutions, right? So then I'm embarking on this project and I'm trying to work with some NLP platform. Can you share a little bit of the story about the really pragmatic enablement and speed up of those projects which can be achieved with your platform?
Yeah, and I think, well, first of all, how fun is AI? That as technologists, we all get to be philosophers at the same time. It's fascinating to listen to all of you, even draw the metaphor to the lamp, Mohammed. So I appreciated that. But here's what I would say. Look, at every step, if I look at how Siri was built or how Alexa was built as well, and Watson brute forcing its game with Jeopardy and what have you, the fact that at every turn, AI is evolving so quickly where you would have to do all this entity and intent matching. And now you can just throw a PDF file in it and you get an instant opportunity to talk to that document. By the way, that document, what do we think is in a PDF file? Is it a single page? Well, heck, it could be the 2,000 page defense budget, right? It could be somebody's book. And now in a book club, I can be talking literally to the book and say, hey, what did that character do? Where did they go? What was their thinking beyond this? And the fact that I can actually get an answer as if the author was sitting right in the room with us.
Igor, can I interject a little bit and ask you a slight spin on Eugene's question? Let's say somebody listens to this webinar and walks away inspired and says, hey, I'm going to sell it to my company and we're going to get some funding to go run a project to start that journey. What are we talking about? 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years? What is the time to value around some of these applications that we've talked about today?
Okay, let's say you have a bunch of documents stored in a Google Drive or in a SharePoint. Your time to value is 2 minutes. That's it. Give me a link to that content. It gets ingested by the AI, and now it's available for you to access, whether you want to do it via a nice user experience or via an API that you can plug into your various experiences, whether it's web or you wanted to augment a chatbot with extra capabilities. Now, entity intent modeling is still useful. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to be dastardly here, especially for accessing semi-structured and structured information where you want deterministic outcomes, right? You certainly don't want an AI guessing what your bank account balance is. That's where it's useful. But for everything else, you can actually have it just reading websites and reading documents, and you can do that in an afternoon. We actually, with enterprises, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it takes longer to go. Let's say we're talking to Brad here, right? It takes longer to go through their procurement teams and the security checks and all of this normal trimmings that are necessary for working with enterprises than the science now. The science and engineering is brisk.
So let me throw a possible use case. Everybody is on Slack these days, right? So sort of a perfect chat channel. And let's just say company wanted to add people's ability just through the Slack, find, let's say HR information, right? We've talked about this today. So if your HR guidebook essentially is a big PDF file and you have a number of other HR policies, it should in principle be as easy as taking these documents, scanning them through your engine, putting a little automation behind Slack chatbot, and roll out capabilities to your enterprise to at least be able to search relevant language, see what is the amount of vacation that people are allowed to have, or when are the corporate holidays, or anything like that. Am I thinking about this right?
Yeah, you can have a Slack channel, drop a PDF into it, and a couple minutes later, you can start asking it questions.
Very cool. Thanks, Igor. Back to you, Eugene.
Sounds really exciting. So, Brad, one final question to you from me, at least, on this panel. Like you spoke a lot about developing and hurdles which you have to overcome and value which you can bring with those kind of solutions. And you mentioned like something which was pretty close to to my ear. Something you said like, how do we find the right talent who can think about that in a proper way, who can think statistically, who can think in terms of data and algorithms? So what's your experience? How and where you are sourcing your talent and how you grow your talent in your organization?
Yeah, this is a great question and something I'm very passionate about. And I like how you said it's find your talent and grow your talent, right? And the one I would add onto there too is retain your talent. because I spend so much of my day doing those three things, right? Acquiring, developing, and retaining talent. And newsflash, we all know this, right? And for the audience in this space, the talent that we're looking for is in such demand that you're going to have the problems finding them, developing, and retaining them. It is quite the challenge. On the kind of acquiring or finding the talent, I would recommend starting early. You know, if you're in a big corporation, you know, you have intern programs and things like that. If you're a smaller company, you know, get these people right out of school, right? They'll be a little bit more loyal to you than, you know, as they're just coming out and you're kind of their first opportunity. Put them on the right type of projects, allow them to have a lot of visibility, and shield them from some of those pressures, like I mentioned earlier. I think on the developing one, we have to feed these people, right? In the sense that they like to have different challenges, right? Give them unique type of projects, roll them off to different type of projects, increase their internal and external networks. And then on kind of the retention piece, you're going to lose people. It's just the name of the game, right? You're going to have to adapt with the times. I think COVID has been a very nice, like, kind of social experiment because all these companies are moving remote, right? So if you're in a company that doesn't allow remote opportunities for your data scientists and AI engineers, then you're going to lose them, right? So you have to be flexible with kind of what's going on. You have to compensate. And probably the last thing I would say is you need to have a succession plan for your key resources. You're going to lose them, right? So what you can't be is kind of called flat-footed. You need to have either cross-training or the next person up, or even potentially, you know, third-party contractors that you could bring in to fill those voids, you know, if and when they do happen.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense, and the obtaining and retaining the right talent is a major concern of every leader in the data science. And this talent is rare, and I hear you. Thank you very much, Brad. And I want to turn to some audience questions. So one of the questions was pretty generic, which came, so how does this panel differentiate artificial intelligence from machine learning? That question arises pretty much on every talk which we have about artificial intelligence. And who wants to take this one? Mohammed?
I can take it because I answered it actually yesterday. So let me give you my, memory of like my answer, which is really, it depends on who you talk to. Don't worry about the specifics, honestly. Like it's marketing for the most part. These are monikers. We can just agree, on the mainstream definitions. And then if somebody says something else, just ask them to explain what they mean by that. And in 2 sentences, you right away align or map these 2 different definitions. But, I would say like 80% of people agree that AI is the superset. You get machine learning inside of that, and you get deep learning inside of that. And then within machine learning next, like maybe there's another dimension where you can slice things by, supervision or not, or reinforcement learning or not. But really, some people would say, well, AI now is the, whatever is hot. It doesn't matter. Like, it's a moving target. So without going into like all of these schools of definitions, it's just whatever you think that the other person thinks. And in case of like, confusion or disambiguation is required, just ask them what they mean.
I'll add my 2 cents. When I was a young engineer, I spent 10 years at Sun Microsystems, and that was a formative time in my career. And Sun coined this phrase, network is a computer, right? Like what the heck does it mean? It's not to be taken apart literally, syllable by syllable, but we understand the concept. And AI and machine learning to me is sort of in the same category.
For me, the answer is even more simple. Like, what is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is how to make computers behave intelligently without telling them exactly what to do. Right now, all the programming, like historically, all the programming was tell computers exactly what needs to be done and they will do it. Artificial intelligence is how to do it without telling them exactly in microscopic details what to do and still get the intelligent behavior back. And machine learning is just one of the technology which enables it. There are other technologies which can do that. And we probably have one more question to ask that is very specific from Mind Alliance. Is Prion using a narrow symbolic AI approach that combines ontologies and ML, machine learning and deep learning, or spill out your secret sauce? That's basically the question.
Well, I will say you should have left with Mohammed's definition, because he built the perfect Russian nesting doll to frame it. So we just need, you can get really, really small. And I think your question now that was just posed, they're asking for the smallest of the little nesting dolls, if you will, in terms of specifics. We don't bother generating a graph. You don't have to. You don't have to with this new stuff. You could, if you want a synthetic one generated after the fact, fine, you can have one, but you don't need to have one ahead of time. That's what's really exciting about where the work is going. At the same time, we're realistic. That can deal well with unstructured stuff, but you still have all of this structured stuff that people are tending to. This is where deterministic results are required by these enterprises and everybody's still trying to figure out the right way to blend these two worlds together. Obviously, natural language to SPARQL, natural language to SQL are things that have to be envisioned at an appropriate time. Right now, the accuracy for NL to SQL, for instance, is fairly poor still. But sooner or later, you'll actually be able to cross all of those streams and have a unified experience. Whereas Victoria was actually asking all of those sample questions in that content. You know, in my mind, I was, it was almost like a sorting hat. Okay, that one has to be dealt by that type of retrieval. Okay, that one has to be dealt by that retrieval. Oh, that's going to cluster and do this. Oh, that requires, us to know these entities, or the really fun stuff, right? So what's the really fun stuff? Multi-hop reasoning and things of that sort, where we have to now take something that Victoria asked and start dancing and jumping across all of these different resources, and then even, do several iterations of that in the same way that we had to do multi-stage recognition. It got the ASRs got really good, and you started doing adaptation passes, and then you could do even hierarchical language models where you say, all right, I'm going to blast it to several different LMs that were tuned on different things. Are people to disambiguate, are people talking about sports? Are they talking about weather? And then you bring back and then try to sort them by confidence and stuff like that before blurting something out. So hysterically enough, we all get paid to play with Lego bricks.
Right.
That's why all of us are glowing. That's all we do, and it's awesome.
A lot of those Lego bricks are arriving every day, and we're playing with them all. And we're out of time, and I want to thank our great panel for your wisdom and your insights today. I want to thank our audience for your attention and questions. And I hope to see you in our next talks. And this is one which we will have very soon. Really, really appreciate your participation. Thank you all. And we all can part with the vision that one day we will all be Tony Starks talking to our Jarvises. And the time is coming. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And,
thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.